Daniel Creed drove slowly along the winding dirt road, his truck bumping gently over the familiar dips and curves of his grandfather's land. The scent of pine and dust filled the air, the thick forest enclosing the trail like a secret corridor. It had been almost 6 years since he last set foot here, but the land hadn't forgotten him. Nor had he forgotten it. At the edge of the estate stood an old wooden gate, weather-worn but sturdy, with a rusted sign that read, "Private Property, Nitrogen Monoxide Trespassing." Daniel parked the truck, stepped out, and took a deep breath. The quiet was almost unnatural. No city noise. No phones ringing. Just wind through trees and the creak of old wood. He reached beneath his shirt and pulled out a chain with a single iron key. The gate swung open with a groan. The house came into view like an old friend, tall, rustic, sturdy. A large wooden cabin with a wraparound porch, sagging in places but proud. Daniel dropped the tailgate and began unloading his things. Tools. Boxes. Supplies. He wasn't just visiting. He was moving in for good. As he worked, memories surfaced uninvited. Fishing in the stream with his grandfather. Learning how to fix a tractor in the barn. Chopping firewood. Laughing under the stars. This wasn't just land. It was legacy. The next morning, Daniel set out to inspect the property. He walked along the old fencing that bordered the woods and fields, making notes of where repairs were needed. Near the far southern boundary, he spotted something strange, bright orange flags stuck in the ground and a wooden stake that read, "HOA Property, Do Not Disturb." His eyes narrowed. The nearest development, Evergreen Meadows, had popped up in the last 5 years, just over the ridge. But they had no claim here. He pulled out his phone and took pictures of the markers. Something was off. That afternoon, as he fixed a loose board on the porch, a white SUV rolled up the driveway. A woman stepped out, dressed in a white blouse, beige slacks, and expensive shoes utterly unsuited for country roads. Her hair was perfectly styled, and she held a clipboard like it was a weapon. She introduced herself with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her name was Karen Whitmore, and she was president of the Evergreen Meadows Homeowners Association. Daniel didn't shake her hand. Karen informed him, politely but firmly, that his estate had recently been included in the expanded Evergreen Meadows boundary, and thus he was now subject to HOA regulations. Sheds needed to be painted. Fences registered. Signage removed. Daniel looked at her in disbelief. This was a private estate, 80 years in his family. There had never been any agreement, discussion, or consent. The idea that an HOA could suddenly decide his land was under its thumb was laughable and dangerous. He told her flatly that she was mistaken. Her HOA stopped at the fence line, which was nearly 400 feet from where they stood. Karen smiled condescendingly and suggested he check with the county. Then she got into her car and drove off like nothing had happened. Daniel wasted no time. The next day, he drove down to the county records office and requested everything they had on the Creed estate. The clerk brought out a thick file of original documents, including old survey maps showing the land's exact boundaries. His estate was clearly outside Evergreen Meadows by a wide margin, but that didn't explain why stakes were showing up in his yard. When he returned, Daniel found a new marker in the backfield. It was bigger this time, a tall post labeled Evergreen Community Walking Trail, Public Access. His stomach dropped. They weren't just staking claims. They were building. He yanked the post out of the ground and tossed it aside. The next morning, a man in a suit showed up in a luxury sedan. He handed Daniel a file containing a cease and desist letter, citing HOA violations and threatening daily fines. The man advised him to seek legal counsel. Daniel slammed the door in his face. That night, he sat at his grandfather's old desk, poring through the estate records. Deeds, blueprints, letters from surveyors. It was all there. The property was unquestionably private and free from HOA jurisdiction. But Karen wasn't acting on ignorance. She was acting on power. The following day, Daniel heard machinery. He rushed to the back of the property and found 3 workers in reflective vests staking more flags and marking trees. They told him they were clearing space for a bench, part of the HOA's new shared nature trail. Daniel told them to leave immediately. They didn't argue. Later that day, he visited Sheriff Ruiz, a blunt, no-nonsense officer who had known his grandfather. She confirmed the HOA had filed paperwork claiming an annexation of a disputed property line. The matter was under review. But in the meantime, unless Daniel could prove otherwise, it would be treated as pending. She advised him to talk to a lawyer. That evening, Daniel found an old contact, Alden Price, a retired real estate attorney who had once represented his grandfather. Alden still remembered the Creed estate. They met at a bar in town, and Daniel explained everything. Alden listened carefully, then asked for the original survey maps. He said if the HOA was filing an illegal annexation, it could be stopped, but fast action was critical. By the end of the week, things had escalated. More signs had appeared on Daniel's land. One notice said his tool shed violated community aesthetic guidelines. Another warned of unauthorized fencing. Karen herself arrived with 2 HOA board members and taped several official-looking citations to Daniel's fence. But they didn't just tape papers. They crossed onto the porch. Daniel stepped outside, silent, and began recording on his phone. Karen tried to wave him off, but he said nothing. Just filmed? Moments later, the sheriff's cruiser pulled into the drive. Sheriff Ruiz stepped out and asked what was going on. Daniel showed her the signs, the video, and the records. Karen claimed the land was under HOA jurisdiction. Ruiz asked if she had a warrant or court order. She didn't. Without a word, the sheriff told her to leave the premises. Karen scoffed, but the sheriff stood firm. The board members backed off, and the trio returned to their SUV. As they drove away, Daniel remained on the porch. The sun was setting, casting gold over the hills. In his hand, he held the video recording. Later that night, he went inside and opened the mantel above the fireplace. Inside a hidden compartment was an old cigar box. He hadn't touched it in years. Inside was a black and white photo of his grandfather standing proudly in front of the newly built estate. Beneath it, folded carefully, was the original land deed, hand-signed, sealed, and unbreakable. Daniel looked out the window toward the trees. They wanted a fight. They were going to get one. The morning after the confrontation, Daniel sat on the front porch sipping black coffee, the steam rising into the cool mountain air. The quiet of his estate had always brought him peace, but today it carried a different weight, the calm before a storm. Karen had crossed a line. No more warnings. No more talks. It was time to fight back with truth, law, and fire. Inside, the kitchen table was covered in papers, old land surveys, boundary maps, deed records, photos, notarized letters, and the county parcel ID map printed from the courthouse. Daniel had spent the night cataloging every inch of proof that the Creed estate stood well beyond the HOA's grasp. Alden Price arrived just after noon, carrying a leather briefcase and a folder marked Emergency Injunction. His age hadn't dulled his sharp legal mind. As he spread the documents across the table, Daniel explained everything: the trespassing, the workers, the forged signs, the threats. Alden nodded grimly. They're banking on intimidation and bureaucracy. HOAs win because most folks won't fight back. But you've got history, legacy, and a damn good case. By the end of the day, Alden had filed for a temporary restraining order in county court, demanding an immediate halt to all HOA activity on Daniel's land. He also filed a cease and desist against Evergreen Meadows for unauthorized entry, damage, and harassment. It was the first real move in a legal war. But Karen wasn't going to back down quietly. That weekend, Daniel attended a community town hall meeting in the Evergreen Meadows clubhouse. The building was pristine glass doors, bright white interiors, potted plants on every corner. Dozens of HOA residents sat in chairs facing a podium. At the front, Karen stood confidently, clipboard in hand. Daniel entered, carrying a binder of evidence under one arm. Eyes followed him as he made his way to a seat in the back. Karen spotted him, her smile tightening. She cleared her throat and began. As many of you know, we've recently extended our boundary to include affiliate properties along the forest line, including the parcel currently occupied by Mr. Daniel Creed. Our goal is to ensure our community remains safe, orderly, and aesthetically pleasing. Someone in the audience asked, "But doesn't that land have its own records?" Karen replied smoothly, "We've submitted updated surveys and are waiting for final county approval. In the meantime, we expect all affiliate residents to comply with basic guidelines. No exceptions." Daniel stood up. "So you're announcing a takeover without legal ownership?" Karen's tone sharpened. "Mr. Creed, you're welcome to speak during the open comment portion." "Right now." Daniel walked to the front, dropped his binder on the podium, and opened it. The room fell silent. Inside were maps, timestamps, satellite images, and official documents. He held up the original land deed with the county seal. Then he displayed photos of the boundary markers that had stood on the property since the 1970s. "You forged extensions. You posted false markers. You dug up land that doesn't belong to you. And now you're lying to your community to cover it up." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. One man stood up. "Wait, are you saying Karen lied about the property line?" Karen's composure cracked. "He's twisting the facts. The expansion is legal. We have a right." "You have nothing," Daniel interrupted. "And if anyone here steps onto my land again, it won't just be civil court. It'll be criminal charges." He packed up his binder and left without another word. That night, someone threw a rock through his truck window. It wasn't random. The next morning, Daniel filed a police report. Sheriff Ruiz promised extra patrols but warned him. Karen had influence, and things might get uglier before they got better. Daniel decided to escalate. He hired a drone company to fly over the property and capture aerial footage of the boundary. The video showed clearly where the HOAS fence stopped and where the unauthorized stakes had been planted. It also captured footage of workers walking across his land without consent. With Alden's help, Daniel prepared for the court hearing. It wasn't just about proving ownership, it was about exposing fraud. In court, Karen arrived dressed in a sleek gray suit, flanked by 2 HOA board members and a young attorney. Daniel wore a clean shirt, jeans, and a calm stare. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Justice Langley, listened carefully as both sides presented their arguments. Karen's lawyer claimed the AO had followed due process, that their boundary expansion had been preliminary but necessary for community growth. They claimed Daniel had refused to cooperate and was hostile and aggressive. Alden stood calmly and laid out the facts, original deeds, satellite overlays, aerial footage, and county records. Then he showed a letter from a county official stating that no annexation request had ever been approved for the Creed estate. Finally, Daniel took the stand. He spoke with quiet resolve about his grandfather's legacy, the stolen peace, the false citations, and the relentless harassment. He ended with a simple sentence. "They're not just trying to take my land, they're trying to erase my family." When the ruling came down, the courtroom was silent. Justice Langley sided with Daniel. The HOA had no jurisdiction, no approval, and no right to interfere with the Creed estate. The restraining order was made permanent. Karen Whitmore and the Evergreen HOA were ordered to remove all signs, flags, and markers and to cease all contact with Daniel Creed. Additionally, they were fined for trespassing and ordered to reimburse the cost of the drone survey and the legal filings. Karen's face turned pale as the judgment was read. She stormed out of the courtroom without speaking to anyone. But the consequences didn't stop there. A month later, a whistleblower from within the HOA came forward, revealing emails that showed Karen had knowingly forged documents to expand the boundary. She had also been negotiating a secret deal with a land developer to sell part of Daniel's wooded acres, the very land she was trying to claim. That story made the local paper. The headline read, "HOA President Caught in Land Grab Scheme, Whistleblower Confirms Forgery." Karen was forced to resign. Several board members stepped down. An investigation was launched into HOA finances, and residents of Evergreen Meadows began questioning everything they'd once trusted. Daniel never gloated. He simply returned to his estate, fixed the fence, repaired his truck window, and rebuilt the back shed the way his grandfather had taught him. One crisp morning, he stood by the fence line and watched the wind move through the trees. The fake markers were gone. The noise had stopped. His land and his peace had been restored. For the first time in a long while, he smiled.